Welcome to One Tired Teacher, episode 44. The first step in behavior management is building rapport. So today we are going to be jumping into our behavior management, classroom rapport, changing your culture, any way you want to look at it, even looking at some of the hard things about discipline and really taking a deeper dive into this topic. We're going to be starting this series this week, and it will be continuing for quite some time because there's so much to share, and I know that a lot of teachers are having a really hard time with that. With this topic. I know for myself as a student support specialist, I am responding to a massive amount of issues. So there's a lot to talk about and a lot to learn and some mindset shifts that I'm hoping that we all have, and how we can cope and deal with this and support our students and support one another as we go through what feels like a really intense time for children's behavior. So I hope you'll stick around.
Welcome to One Tired Teacher. And even though she may need a nap, this teacher is ready to wake up and speak her truth about the trials and treasures of teaching. Here she is, wide awake. Wait, she's not asleep right now, is she? She is awake, right? Okay. From Trina Debery Teaching and Learning, your host, Trina Debery.
So, hey, I'm so happy that you're here joining me on this very intense journey and discussing behaviors and behavior management and how we are going to resolve some of these things that we are seeing in the classroom, especially some of these really intense behaviors that often get in the way of actual teaching. And it can be very difficult. It can be difficult for us to maintain the pace in which we are mandated to be on, and it's difficult for other children in the classroom, and it's difficult for that kid that also is breaking down and having these issues. And everybody has a perspective. There's definitely a perspective from each person involved, from the classroom teacher to the student that is breaking down, to the rest of the students that are in the class, to the administration that is supporting or trying to support classrooms. The parents that are involved. There's always a different perspective, and I think that can be really interesting. And sometimes I think when we're in the midst of these types of situations, we don't always see the perspective of others. And so hopefully this will give you a little bit of perspective along with the information that you're going to receive. So, all right. So, we're starting. Before we start, I do want to say, and this episode is being sponsored by Amy Porterfield's free masterclass, 3 Behind the Scenes Secrets to Digital Course Success, which is available now. And in fact, today I think was the first day that she had the masterclass available. So if you are hearing about this for the first time, don't worry. There's still opportunities for you to participate if you choose. This is really for teachers who are thinking about jumping into the world of teacherpreneur, where they want to start their own business. They want to start their own side business, and you have a great deal to offer as an educator, and you want to share it with other educators. And maybe you have considered creating a digital course to share with other teachers. And the absolute best person to learn digital courses from is Amy Porterfield. And yes, her actual course, Digital Course Academy, is a huge financial investment and a time investment. But if you're thinking about, your future as a teacherpreneur, then this is definitely something that you want to look into. I will link to this course this masterclass, this free masterclass, in the show notes. I am a proud affiliate partner with Amy. I went through Digital Course Academy this year, and it was a really unbelievable experience. And I created my first digital course, and I'm actually working on a second digital course. My first one was geared towards teacherpreneurs. My second one will be geared towards teachers. And it's going to honestly be on behavior. So I'm excited about that, and I look forward to letting you know when that is ready and available. And and you can see from there. But anyway, if you're interested in the free masterclass, then I will give you a link to that, and you can hop on over and see what that's all about. But if you are ready to jump back into your classroom and into all things teaching, then we've got to talk. We got to talk about some of these behavior things, because this is a crazy time in our world where we are seeing the repercussions of trauma and behavior and expectations that may or may not be developmentally appropriate for some kids. And I think that we are really seeing the ramifications of what's going on in the world around us. And we often blame parents. Let's be honest. We often blame the parents. We feel like they're not doing all the things that they could do for their own child. We blame video games. We blame social media. We blame all these other factors, and sometimes we don't necessarily look at the things that we are doing as a school system to contribute and actually make this issue worse. So I think we're going to have to step back and look at some of the things and some of the ways in which we contribute as well, because the expectations that we currently have on students sometimes are part of the problem, and not even sometimes. A lot of times they're a part of the problem. As I've got 20 years of experience in education, and 17 of those years were spent in the classroom in first grade and second grade, mainly in second grade. And that I spent a year as a student, a little bit over a year as a student support specialist, which in that role, it was more of an administrative type of role. And I did deal with discipline, and I did deal with things like that. But I dealt with so many other aspects of the school that wasn't my main focus. And we had multiple people doing that. So we all equally, including the administrators, the principal and assistant principal, we all equally divided that. So it wasn't like all one part of my experience. And then I was a media specialist. Then I resigned for a while, worked on some, materials for teachers and for teacherpreneurs. And then now I am back in the school system, and I am a student support specialist again. And this time the role it's basically all discipline. That's not necessarily the role that I thought that it was going to be, or that was necessarily described, but it is what I have found myself in. And although there's other things that I want to do, and there's other areas of my expertise and knowledge that I can share and, can contribute, I am inundated with behavior. It is literally one call after another all day long. And so I have a huge awareness of what is going on in the classroom, and what are happening for teachers and what they're dealing with on a regular basis. And I am seeing it in younger kids. I am seeing it in kindergarten and first grade and second grade, and more than I'm seeing it anywhere else. And so that has made me think, and it made me think the last time, several years ago, it also made me think. It made me think that it wasn't just the outside pressures. It was also, it had to have something to do with us. And sometimes when you're in the classroom, you have your perspective as the teacher. You have your perspective of what's going on in your classroom and what you're seeing from year to year to year. And you're noticing that kids are coming less prepared, or kids are coming and they're struggling more with behavior. And if you've been doing it for a long time, you have that advantage where you can look across years of experience and you can go, wait a minute, this is not how it started. What in the world is going on? And so I think that I feel like I have that benefit of having those years of experience, because I've been able to watch it from the very beginning. I started in 1997 and it is currently 2019. And I had a chance to watch what is going on in education. And I've also had the opportunity to have a different perspective. I've seen it from administrators' side. Now I'm seeing it from like someone who's solely focusing on behavior. And I've seen it from a special area teacher as the media specialist. I was on the rotation. And so getting those different perspectives has really helped me to actually see that there are things about this that are coming from our school system. And, when we say that kindergarten is the new first grade and first grade is the new second grade and on and on and on. Maybe we've changed the expectations so much and we focus so much on the rigor, which I honestly hate that word, but we focus so much on that we have forgotten what child development is. And just because we have these expectations doesn't necessarily mean that all students are going to be able to accomplish them. And it's almost like let's say we've decided to change the age of walking, and no longer are we saying that it's appropriate for kids to walk at the age of 12 months. Like that's the range. 12 months is the average. No longer is the average 12 months. Now we're going to say the average is 9 months. And if your child is not walking at 9 months, then they might need some remediation or they might need an intervention because they're not walking at 9 months. We really feel like we need to have a more rigorous standard of walking. And so we're going to make that 9 months. And if kids can't do it, then that's a problem. And they need to be identified immediately. We need to be working on making sure that they are walking right away and they are already behind if they're not walking at 9 months. Doesn't that sound ridiculous to you? Sometimes that's what I feel like is the case with some of these expectations. And I don't necessarily think that when people came together and worked on new standards for, nation, I don't think that they were not thinking of these things. I think it was the interpretation sometimes of states that where they I don't know what they're thinking in some cases. And I don't know when just because we decided that some kids can do it doesn't necessarily mean that every child can do it. And I find that very frustrating. And when kids are coming in to kindergarten who have never been in a classroom before because they didn't go to pre-K and they don't have to go to pre-K. They're not legally obligated to go to pre-K, nor are they legally obligated to go to kindergarten in that fact in Florida, which is where I'm from. We don't understand why they're not reading almost immediately and they don't know how to hold a pencil. It's just mind-blowing to me. Like these babies are coming in and they're not ready. Some of them are not ready. And it would be like just as crazy as saying they had to walk by 12 months. Of course you're going to have, or 9 months. Of course you're going to have kids that, like my son, he walked at 9 months. Does that mean anything? No. It means he walked at 9 months, good for him. The average was 12 months. He walked at 9 months. And that didn't mean anything for the rest of his life. So it's really irrelevant, honestly. But just even if we had you have a child that walks at 14 months or 15 months or sometimes even 18 months, it doesn't mean they're a slow walker, that they're never going to learn how to walk. It means that they took a little bit more time, and that is okay. And so some of these pressures that we put on kids are just outrageous. And they contribute to some of these issues that we're seeing in the classroom. It's just the honest truth. When kids are kicking and screaming going into school, or when they are crying, or they're rolling on the floor, or they're standing on desks and tables, or they want to play in a play area that actually doesn't even exist in most kindergarten classrooms anymore, I think that has to tell us something. We have to think about what is going on with some of these children and why they're behaving this way. I think it's really key. So that's the first thing that I want to say. And so, yes, I do have multiple perspectives, and I do think that my perspective has changed. And I really feel like I'm on a mission now to help other teachers shift their paradigm and see where this is coming from, why this has happened. We have to know, we have to know why, because that will help us determine a solution. That will help us to figure out what we need to do what steps we need to put in place to change the behavior, to reshape the behavior, and not just to have temporary, quick solutions like, let me call the office and get this kid out of here. Getting the kid out of your classroom is not solving the problem. And honestly, it's giving away your power on a regular basis. It's telling kids, hey, I'm waving the white flag. I can't deal with you. I can't deal with this on my own. I need someone else to step in. And sometimes we do need other people to step in. When our child is in danger or when other children are in danger, we need backup. We need backup immediately. But if our student is crying in the corner or our student is, even under a table crying, then or even making noises. Like sometimes there are things that we have to try within our own classroom so that we don't hand our power away. We don't tell all the rest of the kids, yep, we can't handle this, I have to call for someone else. I think that that's an important thing to think about. And I also think it's important to realize that some of the things that are happening are a direct result of what we are doing. And how we've set up the classroom, how we have built the community in our classroom, or how we haven't, or the expectations we have from the moment they walk in the door, what this means for kids when they come into school. Does this set kids off, or does it encourage them to want to be there? So all of these things we're going to be talking about in the next few weeks, because they really have play a really important role in why we're seeing what we're seeing. So I do feel like it's my mission to help other teachers to understand some of these paradigm shifts that I've had myself. And I also feel strongly about supporting teachers and the issues that they're facing day to day, because I know it is hard. I know it is rough. I spent 17 years in the classroom. I understand. And I spent another year as a special area teacher, and it was hard. I'm not even going to lie. It was so much harder than I could have ever imagined. And my first instinct was to call the office on a regular basis when I first got there, because I was overwhelmed. I was losing control. I didn't have the power. And I said that and showed that to my students daily for a couple of weeks. And then I was like, I can't keep doing this. I'm not going to gain control of this. I'm not going to create a solution in this situation. I'm making this situation worse. I have to figure this out. I have to figure out what to do in order to get these kids to enjoy coming, to want to come to my media center, to want to learn, to know that I care about them and have them care about me. And these kids were rough. They had been left so many times. They had been abandoned, mistreated. It was a very difficult place to be. And they tested you because they needed to know that you were going to stick around. So they tested me massively, and I failed. I failed big time. It was like one failure after another, and I felt like a failure. It was an honest failure every single day. And I cried every single day. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. But then I started researching, and I started reading, and I started watching videos on YouTube, and I started reaching out to people that I knew were experts at this. And I had to search back into myself and remember why I was successful in the classroom, because I really didn't have very many behavior problems. I did in the very beginning of teaching, but that's before I knew any better. And I mean, I had some serious problems when I first got there. And I thought I was going to be an expert at classroom management. I really thought I was going to truly be like really good at it, because I'd been a mental health tech and a behavioral health center that we used to have in town, which we no longer have, but it was a private one. But it was some rough kids there. We had like a juvenile delinquent wing. Like we had people that were like, they had to be there because basically they were in jail. And then we had like a mental health facility for really young kids, little kids, like elementary kids and young, like, again, kindergartners, pre-Kers. I mean, a lot of kids. And then we had a gang unit from Chicago of kids. I mean, it was some extreme behavior. So I thought, I got this. I know how to deal with this. I was choked before by a child or a teenager. And so I'm like, I totally could handle this. And when I got to the classroom, I was like, no way, I can't handle this. This is rough. I had a student that like was throwing things and trying to attack other children. And I had to like move her out of the classroom without like picking her up, because this is before they had, programs that you learn so that you can actually remove a child physically, but you have to be certified. But this was before that. So I like had to get her out of the room to protect the rest of my kids. And luckily I had an inclusion model where I had this speech teacher in my classroom. So she was in there, and I had the child that was freaking out. Let's call her Sally. So that's not her name, but let's call her that. And plus that was, over 20 years ago, in 1997. So Sally, let's say Sally, she was freaking out. She was outside. She was hitting me. She was punching me in the stomach. She was calling me a big fat elephant. And to get out of the way, she was like determined to get back in the classroom and attack the kids. And I was like, no, I'm not letting you back in. So she was 6. So it wasn't like she was really hurting me, but she was trying to, but she wasn't. So I waited until the guidance counselor at the time, this was before the days of school counselors, but this is the guidance counselor. She came down and she, had to physically remove her. And it was crazy. And I was like, what have I gotten myself into? So that stuff did happen to me in the beginning of teaching. I didn't know what to do. I had another student that was literally throwing poop in the bathroom and like hurt himself on purpose, walked right into this, like banged his head on purpose right into this, like we had these big crayons in front of our school, hit his head right into it and, had bleeding and whatever. And that was scary and upsetting for all kinds of reasons. And so I had some serious behavior issues in the very beginning. And I had to learn how to deal with this. I had to learn how to cope and how to manage. And I had to remember what I'd learned as a mental health tech, and I had to remember, and I had to learn. And then again, like the situation in the media center, I had to learn, how am I going to do this? Because if I call the office all the time, it's not going to be solved. This problem isn't solved. So that's when my perspective really changed. And that's what I want to share with you. I want to share with you some things that I've learned along the way and from other teachers that I admire and respect and very often have very few, if any, ever behavior problems. And so I think when we learn from each other, we reach out, we work together, we read, we research, we have the opportunity to really change the situation. So I want you to know this is coming from a place of understanding. I've been there. I understand. I get it. It's coming from a place of caring. I care about the whys behind the behavior, because when you really start looking at the whys, it's heartbreaking. I'm not going to lie. It's hard. It's tough. It's hard to look at. It's hard to see why this is happening and where this is coming from. Sometimes it's a truly horrific story for kids. And sometimes, things that I've done in my own classroom have been a contributor. And I'm just going to say, for example, I'm going to give you an example. And that is, like, I used to have kids copying the agenda when that was the first thing they did on Monday morning. They came in and that was their bell work. They copied the agenda for the week. I had no idea for a long time that this was really difficult for 7-year-olds. Some kids have really poor visual memory. So from looking up to looking down, it was like taking forever because they couldn't remember. They couldn't remember from one second to the next. And I actually have this issue myself. So I'm surprised I didn't figure this out faster. Like, it's hard for me to do those kind of tedious tasks where I have to look from one thing to the next because I literally can't remember. And I'm like, oh my goodness, what was that? How did you spell that? What was that word? What comes next? Like, I had to do it in really small chunks. And so copying the agenda was causing some of my kids to immediately avoid work, not want to do it, refuse to do it, play around, goof off. It was causing behavior problems right from the get-go. And then I was like, what is the point of this? I want parents to know what's happening during the week. Why don't I just print it for the kid and staple it into their planner? They don't need to copy this. This is busy work. This isn't really teaching them anything. Because teaching them to copy from one place to another, like, there's copy and paste now. Like, why is that a relevant skill? It didn't help me. It still doesn't help me. I have, like I said, a very poor visual memory. That is difficult for me. Tedious tasks like that feel like torture. And I don't want that for kids, and it's not necessary. I still have this objective being met that I want the parents to know what's going on. And just because kids copy their spelling words into the planner doesn't mean that's how they learn spelling words. In fact, that is one of the lowest forms of for kids to actually learn words. I've done a lot of research on the science of spelling, and that is not an effective way for kids to learn how to spell them. For a lot of kids. Now, for some kids, it can work, but for a lot of kids, it doesn't work. So what's the point of that? So I stopped doing that. I stopped having that be the first thing that they do on the first day they come back to school after a weekend. Talk about setting them up for failure. So that was one of the first things that I changed. But again, so I do get it. I really do get it. And and I am coming from a place of caring, and I truly want to save the sanity of teachers, because I know that it is hard. This job is hard. It is tiring. That is one of the reasons I created this podcast. I wanted to share with teachers. I wanted to share information with teachers. I wanted other teachers to share information with teachers. I wanted to gather information about things that we all go through together. And I wanted you to know that you're not alone. I felt alone sometimes, especially when I was in the media center. I had a great team before that, and after that, it took a while and it was hard. And so I want you to know that you're not alone. So I am coming from a place of understanding and caring, just so you know, because sometimes when we listen to people and they give us advice or they give us tips or they say they're looking out for us, and then we almost feel criticized. Believe me, this isn't a criticism. I am coming from a place of failure myself, where I failed and messed up and made mistakes and learned from that. And I don't believe that failure is the worst thing that happens to a person. I believe it is sometimes is the best thing that happens to us, because that is an opportunity for us to learn. We know that's a mistake. So what are we going to do differently the next time? So I'm hoping to save you from some of those mistakes, although we all have to go through them to figure it out. But it's just part of teaching. It's part of life. So behavior is often the single most disruptive part of the day. And this is a significant cost to you and to the remaining kids in the class. So what can we do to minimize this cost? What can we do to prevent these things from happening? Like, what does the beginning of this look like? How can we solve this overwhelming problem of behavior issues? And I think that one of the things that we can do is we can really, really begin to understand the most vital aspect of solving behavior issues is building rapport with students. Building rapport with kids is the single biggest factor in your classroom. It makes all the difference. And I cannot even say how important it is. And I do think that we're not spending enough time talking about this. I don't think we're spending enough time in our classroom actually doing this. I don't think that we are integrating it into our classrooms weekly, daily. It needs to be a part of who we are as a classroom community. We have to build that community so that children can feel like they belong. They can feel like they're accepted. They can feel like they're loved, that they're cared about. When kids feel like you care about them, it's a whole nother ball game. I have had hundreds of children that have had those profile cards that come to me saying, this child is this, and this, and this, all these negative things. They talk back. They don't do any work. They don't follow directions. They throw furniture. They climb on furniture. They're mean to other kids, whatever. Like, multiple times I've gotten cards like that about students. And I've been like, whoa, you feel like you've gotten punched in the gut when you get those kind of, notes from the previous teacher, and it scares you. You kind of feel defensive immediately. I stopped looking at that kind of stuff. I'm like, I don't want someone else's opinion to affect the way I perceive a child. I don't want to do that. Or I'll take it and I will flip it. As soon as they come in, I make a big deal about them being there. I welcome them warmly. I ask them to help me out. I put them in charge of something. I turn it around. I go, okay, they're probably acting this way because they don't feel like they belong. They don't feel like they are accepted. They are attention seeking. They don't feel like they have any power or control. They feel like they are not being heard. Let me hear them. Let me see them. Let me listen to them. Let me care about them. What will it look like if they felt that? And it has made a huge difference. It has made all the difference. I've had many kids that I never saw the behavior. Like, the behavior stopped. I didn't have to write that to the next teacher. I had to write how important it was for them to be recognized and how important it was for them to be cared about, because if we don't, then we're going to get that same behavior back. And so I think it's really important. And I do feel like in the defense of a teacher, I do feel like we spend a lot of time in our professional development talking about data. And we have put aside crucial conversations about mental health and trauma-informed care and behavior management and building rapport with kids. We've put those things aside because all we are concerned about is how they're going to do on a test. And that's what I mean when I say we're part of the problem. Because we feel like we don't have enough time to talk about those kinds of things. We have to get to the more important things, like how we're going to put together our data notebook. But guess what? The more important things are the behavior, because it is taking time up in our classroom. It is costing us time. So then we don't have time to do all the assessments that we have to do. And we don't have time to redirect our teaching. And we don't have time to teach because we're constantly in reactive mode. We're reacting all the time. We're not proactively trying to solve problems. We're not in the proactive state. When you're in the reactive state, you're in a state of crisis most of the time. When you're in the proactive state, you are thinking of things that may possibly happen and you're heading them off. You're finding solutions to prevent them. I'm sorry, I hit the mic, so if that was loud for you. Finding things to prevent problems from occurring. And I think this training, these conversations, this PD, I think it has to stop taking a backseat, and we have to talk about it, because we are having like real life consequences because of putting these conversations on hold. Real life scary consequences in our schools because we are putting aside behavior and relationships. And that's where I think schools are responsible as well. It's not just that a kid freaked out and decided he wanted to carry a weapon into a school building. It is the fact that we also have not recognized for years, we have missed the signs somehow. And we can't do that anymore. We can't afford to do that anymore. We have to put these things in front. We have to pay attention to this. It will save us time, and it may save us lives. It's really that serious. So it's very important, and it can be really heartbreaking. So it just needs to be a priority. All right. So let me get to some rapport building ways, because I could go on and on about this. And like I said, we're going to be talking about this for the next few weeks. And so we definitely have a long road ahead of us. And so some of these things needed to be said right from the beginning. So I'm going to talk a little bit about rapport building now, and then we'll come back to some of these other things, because, like I said, it can be a massive topic. All right, so here are some ideas for building rapport, because we have to think about this. It has to be important. We have to create these communities. We want it to be a place where kids feel welcome, where they feel loved, where they feel like they belong, where they feel heard, understood, cared about, respected. Like, all of those things are really important. So I reached out to some of my former colleagues and people that I worked closely with, and asked, and even teachers and groups that I'm in, and asked, like, what do you do to build rapport with kids? Because it's so important. And so here are some answers of some of them. And so one of my friends who I worked with forever, and she rarely has behavior problems because she does such a good job of building a classroom community. And she's like, I don't really have things I do. I just talk to them. I ask questions about things they like. I tell them about myself. If there is common ground like pets or something, I show pictures of myself or my dog or me with horses, stuff like that. It's nothing I can put my finger on exactly. And you know what often isn't? Really good teachers often can't tell you how or why they do what they do. I think that is so interesting. Like, it's by nature that they create this atmosphere. It's like they share a vulnerability with their students. And that is one huge key, is being vulnerable, sharing those vulnerable things with your students. One of the first things I share with my students is that I had a reading disability, that I had a learning disability. I'm dyslexic, and learning how to read was very difficult for me. Now, I went through a massive amount of tutoring. My grandparents paid for very expensive tutors, and I was in a private school at the beginning of my education. Thankfully, because they are the ones that identified this. There was no pretending that dyslexia didn't exist. And this was in the 70s, for goodness sakes. We're pretending in 2019, and we were not pretending in 1970 70 something. So I think that is sad, but that's another whole topic. But I tell kids that I struggled, that I had a hard time in school, and that I had really good teachers and really caring grandparents and who helped me with this. I mean, my mom too, but my grandparents were the ones that I went to their house after school, and my grandmother worked with me every single day. And then I went to I had tutoring all summer long before first grade, and it mattered. It changed things. And I told them, I'm like, that's what I'm going to do for you. So if something is hard for you, I'm going to help you get through it, because I had to learn strategies. I had to learn ways to overcome obstacles. My brain works differently than your brain. And some of you might have a brain that works like my brain. And look, I went to college. I even went further. I got my master's degree. I'm like, and so if I can do it, you can do it. And I talk about how I struggled in school and how it was hard for me and how I felt bad about myself and how I felt dumb. And kids that feel that way, they can relate. And all of a sudden they're like, she knows how I feel. And talk about an instant connection. And even kids that are like, well, I have no idea what that's like, but they see a vulnerable side of me, and they love that. Kids love when you're vulnerable with them, because it tells them that you're a real person, that you're relatable. You can make connections with them. So that's just one thing. And then I talk about my kids, and I talk about funny stories that my kids do, and they still remember funny stories that they do. And they go home and tell their parents about it, which sometimes is embarrassing. But it's just a huge way of building rapport with children. And I think that they need to hear those kinds of stories about us, and they need to know us in a different way, so that they can feel like they can share about themselves, and they want to share. They want to tell you all kinds of stories. And maybe you don't let them all share one at a time, because that's kind of a low engagement way of getting responses, but you let them turn and talk to a partner, or you let them work at a team of 4, and they all put their heads together and they lift up off their sitters. They put their heads together, they go around their team, and they tell a story about their life. And then when they're all finished, they sit down on their sitters and they show you they're ready by listening, by having a quiet mouth, and they're listening. And you've used a structure that helps them, build a team. Or if you're using a turn and talk, that's another structure you're using with a partner. And then you allow them to share, 1 or 2 stories from that. Or you listen in to some of the conversations and you share out. So then you're not just asking them individually to share something. And they all feel like they got a chance to share because they shared with someone. And I think that is really important as well. So I think that's great. So another thing that this teacher does is she does secret handshakes. So every morning when she greets them, she and a student, they come up with a secret handshake together. That's just their handshake. So she has to learn 20 different handshakes and remember them day after day. And I think that's so cool. What a cool thing to do in the very beginning of the morning. That's how they come into school. I think that's amazing. She has class meetings, and just getting to know them on a personal level and talking to them about the things that they are interested in. She talks about her boys a lot, and the kids, like, they automatically love her kids because she talks about them, and they want to know who they are, and they want to come, and they invite her to come to things that they do that are like her boys, and so she goes. That's another thing. When you get invited to a birthday party, I don't know how many birthday parties I've been to, like a skating rink party. That one was the craziest. At someone's pool, a party. Like, when they invite you, you go, because that tells them that you have more, you care about them beyond the school day. And I think that can be important as well. And if you don't have time for that, that's okay. Then you write them a note and tell them to tell you how it was, and that you were thinking about them at their Taekwondo practice and what happened in it. And you were so excited to be thinking about them that weekend, or whatever, something to show them that you care about them beyond school as well. And then, like, they have class meetups outside of school. Sometimes they maybe will host a board game night. I mean, at school, how cool is that? And some of us, we're in different stages of our career and we don't have time to do those things. Then we have to think of something else. Then maybe we have an hour on Friday that we spend doing things like that, so that we have this team building experience, and it's fun, and it's something to work towards too. Giving kids something to work towards really makes a difference. Another one of my friends who had my child who had my son in second grade, who is now in 10th grade. She says that she lets students talk about personal things. My kids made posters of the beginning of the year with drawings and photographs, and she put them all around the room. They had a sharing day with the poster to talk about anything they wanted. I've seen that at my school now, and I think that's so cool. Like, they get a chance to share about their personal lives. I think that's really cool. She lets students decide or vote for activities they would like to do. She also has little pouches on the back of their chair covers where she leaves student brag tags or special notes. Brag tags can be really powerful. I think that's a great idea. Student celebrations, like celebrating, kids doing really good things, making it a celebration. When kids help another kid, or they know how to walk in line, or things that you care about. And some days we have student compliment days where students are allowed to give each other positive messages in those pockets. I love that. I think that's so cool. Definitely getting other kids involved in celebration of others is a huge benefit to creating a classroom community. And instead of the kid always being like, so-and-so is doing blah, blah, blah. Like, when that one child that does things that we don't love that they do, and then it's like all of a sudden the kids are against them. They see them as the problem child. That's not the solution. In fact, that's the opposite. That's completely giving the child negative attention. That's completely singling them out. It makes them feel worse about themselves. It's not a good feeling for anyone. And it's not a good feeling for the kids, all the rest of the kids. They don't like to know that there's somebody bad. And I hate saying that. Nobody's bad. It's choices that we make that are bad sometimes. It's not who we are. We're not bad. I don't ever want kids to feel like they're bad. So I think that that's really important as well. And so instead of doing that, let's flip that. Let's have kids celebrate the things that kid is doing really well. Look, so-and-so's pushing in their chair, or look, now they're getting their pencil out and they're getting to work. That kind of stuff. We're celebrating the good things they do, the small wins. They're so important. She also has them, sign things for kids and makes them feel really connected to the messages that she leaves. And I just think that those are really powerful strategies, really powerful ways of like building a community. I think the classroom, the way it's set up, I think this really helps too. I think building teams and doing activities that help kids work as a team really help. I love Kagan cooperative learning. I think it is a game changer. And somebody recently called it an old school. And I was like, what? I mean, I was so offended when they said that I was like, really? Like, high engagement activities are old school? Well, if they are, then I'll take old school, because I see a lot of low engagement activities, and low engagement activities lead to behavior problems. High engagement activities lead to kids feeling excited about learning, involved, important. Again, they feel heard, they feel seen, and it changes the dynamics of the classroom. So give me the old school if that's what it takes, because I think Kagan cooperative learning is by far one of the best things that I ever did as a teacher. And I don't know how anyone could ever think anything less of that. But I think some of those things, like I love to have partner work, rally coach, and numbered heads together, and simultaneous roundtable, and rally robin. And I just love all those things. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you got to look it up, because it's really amazing. I think anything that you do to focus on kids getting to know each other in teams and kids getting to know each other as a class, I think those are huge. I think class builders are really important. Again, focusing on getting to know one another. Class meetings, allowing kids to be vulnerable. You're vulnerable. Allowing kids to feel heard. I think it's huge. Because the main reason the kids have behavior issues are because they need attention, or they feel a lack of power and control. They want to feel like they have some choice in what's going on, because they don't feel like they have choices in their world. Or they feel they act up because of their ability. They feel bad about themselves. Let's turn that so that they don't. If they're getting coached by a peer, it doesn't feel as embarrassing. It actually allows them to learn from somebody who's right there, their age, who understands and can help them figure it out. I think that's so powerful. Sometimes kids misbehave because they're avoiding or escaping. They don't want to feel that way about themselves, or they are trying to belong. And when we do things like build classroom rapport, we're allowing them to belong. All right, so I have gone on for a really long time and I have so much more to share with you. So I think I'm going to break this up a little bit because there's just so much more to talk about. So I think that we will do another segment of building rapport in the classroom next week because I did not expect this to go for 44 minutes. I think that's a really long time. And I know that if you've got a long commute, then you're still with me. And if not, then I probably lost you quite a while ago. And this is some really important stuff because building classroom rapport is the key way to avoiding behavior problems. It is a proactive response to behavior, and it's necessary. So we'll be back next week to talk some more about this and to really dive in a little more on how you can even incorporate this in your lessons. So until next time, this one tired teacher is really hoping that you're getting some rest and relaxation over the weekend because this is a hard, tiring job. And I know that you need the break, you need the rejuvenation, you need the time for yourself so you can come back and be there and be ready to tackle some of these issues in your classroom. Until next time, sweet dreams and sleep tight.